So I'm now going to pass over to Wyn Evans. Wyn is the MD of 40 Shillings, and Wyn is going to talk about Dartford as a case study. So over to Wyn.
Thank you. Can you hear me with that microphone? Is that okay? So my name is Wyn Evans. I'm Managing Director of 40 Shillings, and we mainly work with local authorities, developers, investors on helping them manage public engagement through the planning process. And I think the reason I'm here today is due to a chance meeting with John Sullivan, because we're working with a big picture on Dartford. And I mentioned to him, if you include a cinema in a development, it's a much easier sell through the planning process. It is much easier to get planning permission, and that is our experience. And he obviously said, well, you need to come along to this presentation today and tell everyone in this audience that. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm basically going to focus on public engagement in the development process. I'm going to talk about public perceptions of cinemas. I'm going to share with you some of the sort of feedback we've had through our engagement at Dartford. And then I'm going to quickly talk as well about how you can use popular uses like cinemas to help excite audiences and mobilise support for development through the planning process. Quick introduction to 40 Shillings. As I've already mentioned, we're a communications, public relations agency. We work exclusively in the sort of property and development world. Probably 90% of our time is managing engagement with local communities, local stakeholders, and we work with the types of audiences that are in the room today. And what we help you deal with is dealing with these type of people who are up there on this slide. And these are the people that we normally have to deal with. Now, you could say, if things get to this level, we haven't done our job properly, and there might be some truth in that. But one of the things that we also find is most of these objector groups against development tend to be quite small in number. They tend to be a handful of people. They tend to have a lot of influence. They tend to make a lot of noise. They claim to speak for their communities, but actually quite often they're only speaking for a very, very small number of people. And one of the things that we like to do is to try to encourage a much wider debate, a much wider discussion, to really try to understand what public opinion genuinely is. Before I move on to cinemas, I want to share with you some experience that we've had in the past on other developments, because I think they give us an insight into some of these issues. Now, you don't really see these type of developments anymore, but they were quite sort of prominent maybe 10, 15 years ago. It's the classic retail box, maybe out of town, 50, 60,000 square foot, 150 car parking spaces. They tend not to come forward anymore because there's no real market for them. And what we found is that if you stick this logo on these types of proposals, you'd often have huge numbers of objectors. It goes back to the Clone Town comments that were mentioned. I used to work with Tesco about 10, 15 years ago, and wherever Tesco went to put forward development plans, admittedly most of this was in London and the South East, it might have been different in other parts of the UK, there was normally huge amounts of objection. Yet, if you stuck that logo on exactly the same planning application, you would normally get hundreds, if not thousands, of people saying, hey, where can I support this? And when 40 Shillings were first set up, Waitrose were one of our first companies, and we worked with them on about 20 schemes. And our strategy on almost all of them was to tell communities, hey, we'd like to come here, we'd like to move into this community. If you want to back us, go to this website, fill in this form. And sometimes we used to get hundreds, if not thousands of people going into our websites literally on the first weekend that we'd set these sort of projects up. And it sends an enormous message and an enormous signal to councillors and councils that the local community are behind this. And I think, therefore, brand is so important. I also want to share with you some experience we had as well on a out-of-town shopping centre a few years ago, we worked on two very, very similar schemes. Both similar size. They were about 10 units with an anchor store. Once again, it's not the type of thing that are coming forward in the current market. But what was quite interesting was the approach that was taken to the consultation on both schemes. On the one scheme, it was promoted by a sort of two-man band, small development team. And our advice to them was, what you need to do is to try and create a debate in this community about the type of brands that you want to attract. And ask people, are they the type of brands that they would want moving in? And they totally bought into this, and they wrote to a whole range of potential development partners. This was early on in the development process, and we got Debenham signed up, we got Costa Coffee signed up, we got a whole range of brands who'd said they would lend their brands to our CGIs and enable that consultation to happen. On the other scheme, which was being promoted by a major investor, they were really cautious. They didn't want to go down this route at all. They saw the consultation process as a tick box exercise that has to be gone through as part of the planning process. And they sort of said to us, look, we don't really want to get involved in that. Just leave the consultation to our architects and our planners. They will put the words together. They will put the images together. All we want you to do is publicise the exhibitions through local PR and local publicity. Well, on the scheme that was promoting the brands, over the weekend that we were consulting, we had over 1,000 people through the doors. We had over 1,000 responses to our consultation, of which 97% were supportive of an out-of-town shopping centre. Most of the debate was all about, oh, can't you introduce a Primark, or can you introduce another type of brand? On the other scheme, we probably had less than 60 people through the door. They were all the people that I showed up earlier, and the entire debate was about the architectural merits of an out-of-town shopping centre and the number of traffic movements. Now, let me tell you, if you are debating architectural traffic merits and traffic movements with a local community about an out-of-town shopping centre, you're going to lose the debate. And they clearly did. And I think it's just worth thinking about that in terms of engagement moving forward. But what I want to talk to you today is Dartford. We are working with the big picture on Dartford on a really fantastic regeneration scheme. It's a scheme that is being promoted by Dartford Borough Council and Homes England. They have brought in Muse Developments. We've been appointed by them to help the engagement. It's a underutilised brownfield town centre location, really in desperate need of regeneration. And what Muse, in the partnership with Dartford and Homes England, are looking at is a 6 to 8 screen cinema, bars and restaurants, open space, potentially some sort of surgery, and also some sort of residential. It's a fantastic scheme, and our instinct was that the people of Dartford are really going to like this. This is going to be really, really popular. It offers loads of things that will make a great addition to Dartford. So our strategy, talking through with Muse and the clients, was, well, before we go out to public consultation, let's just test that instinct. And they were also at the same time looking at some sort of town centre storyboard, similar to the presentation that you've just had, not with us, with another agency. But as part of that work, they were working with lots of stakeholders, so we asked them to take some soundings on what do you think about this scheme, and the overwhelming response was very, very positive. So our strategy was, let's shout about this as loudly as we can. Let's try and get people involved about it, let them know about it, and let them feel that they can be really engaged. And we put out 25,000 leaflets. There was huge amounts of PR and information in the local media. We took up pop-up stalls, both in Dartford Festival and also in one of the shopping centres that Mark's company runs. We had a very, very strong presence on social media, particularly Facebook, where we took out paid-for adverts, and we got to almost 40,000 people in Dartford who saw those adverts. And it says up here 1,800 hits on our project website. It was actually 1,800 unique views, so 1,800 unique visitors to the project website as a result of this engagement. And if any of you have an opportunity to look at it, it's still live at the moment. It's called Westgate Dartford. Do so, because the website includes far more information than just the scheme. It's also got a really interesting engagement tool, which looks like this. So there are sort of 9 different sections. There's vision, there's master plan, there's about getting about, there's about the new homes. And if you go to that website, you can click on whatever box you want, and it will open up one of these types of things, and you can answer a series of questions. You can leave your comments. The comments that are left are published. We don't publish people's names, but we publish people's comments, and if you want to reply to those comments, you can. So it's a really engaging tool. And the way that we've got most people to that website has been through social media. Despite the fact that we've invited people to respond on free post response forms, they were able to fill in feedback forms at the exhibition, the vast majority of responses we've got back has come through Facebook and social media, which is a really cost-effective way of getting people, informing people about developments and engaging them. And what's been really fascinating is, if people respond to the proposals through the Facebook feed, I'm not sure if you can read that, most of the comments are all negative. We haven't had a huge number, but the ones we have had are generally negative. I'm not sure if you can read it, but they're basically saying, you never listen to us, councils are all the same, and we have had that type of response. But of the people that went from Facebook to our project website, the headline data is this. We've now had over 600 responses, of which almost 500 have left quite detailed comments. 69% have left supportive comments, and just 20% have left what we call negative comments. The yellow up there, 11%, are people declaring themselves as neutral. And that's covering all aspects of this scheme. So if I break that down a bit further, what this slide shows is, are people happy or unhappy about different elements of the scheme? And you will see right at the top, the design. So that's a good tick in the box for TP Bennett. I'm not sure if TP Bennett are in the audience, but they're the architects on this scheme. And they've had a fantastic response on the design. The town centre plans, which pick up the idea of the cinema, also score really, really well. Now, if you look down here, new homes. New homes, it's mainly red. Now, I am actually quite surprised at that, because one of the things that we've been doing more and more of over the last sort of 2 years is actually taking opinion polls. We've actually commissioned our own opinion polls about attitudes towards house building and development, because that's probably the area that we mainly work in. And what we have noticed over the last 4 or 5 years is more and more people are recognising we need to build more homes, because they know people that can't get onto the housing ladder. They know that people who are on housing waiting lists. But once again, if we'd been promoting here a predominantly residential scheme, we would have a much, much harder sell. What's also quite interesting, just above new homes, is surgery, NHS surgery. Now, there are some local issues related to this, in that the NHS are looking at closing a couple of GP surgeries and relocating them into a central offer. But what we've also found when we have gone out and promoted surgeries and schools, all the things that you would have thought local communities would welcome, quite often we've had a negative backlash. And when we've tested that in focus groups, it's often because the public don't believe either developers or local authorities will deliver these things. So there we are talking about, hey, our scheme will deliver a new school or a new surgery, but the public perception is, we've heard that before, you're always saying that, and it never happens. So quite often we find that some of these benefits, like surgery and education, don't get quite down as well as maybe some people in our sector think they do. But the town centre plans have gone down incredibly well. And if we drum down a bit further, so this website caught a huge amount of data. And you see there sort of where cinema rates in terms of the response about what people want to see in the town centre. Now, I should add, this is just a response to one consultation in Dartford. It doesn't mean if you were to do this somewhere else, you would get the same response. But nevertheless, cinema scores quite highly. But what is probably more interesting is some of the other uses there, like social hub, like the improved food and beverage offer. These, like pedestrianised streets, these are also tied in really to that cinema use. Perhaps unsurprisingly, independent shops and bars is something which people like to see at the moment. This is obviously a poll of people who get involved in the planning process. It's not necessarily a poll of people who would actually use these services once they are built. And these are just some of the comments that we've had. One of the things that we have really picked up in the individual comments that have come back through the engagement is that people have spoken very, very supportively of cinemas. And you've got some cracking quotes here about how Dartford's last cinema closed in 1975 and they would like one back. And there is a lot of quotes that has come back through our engagement on welcoming cinemas. So in conclusion, cinemas, in our experience, generate public support. They also support other complementary uses, like bars and restaurants, which in town centre locations are also supported. I've put up there, not that we really deliberately tested this in our engagement, but some of the comments that have come back from the engagement, Nando's, Wagamama, Prezzo, those were the three brands that were most commonly mentioned in the engagement that we've just undertaken. So that's the sort of headline summaries, but I want to just finish really on this slide, is that in the past, we have found through social media, it's much, much harder to get people involved in the engagement element because somebody has to click to the website, they have to look at proposals, they have to read some text, and then they're expected to give their own thoughts on what they think about the development, whether they think it's good or bad, or what could be improved. And what we've often found is once we go beyond the pre-app stage to a submission, the advice that we often give to clients is, well, use these tools in mobilising support. And if you're using social media and web tools to mobilise support, it becomes a much easier ask to get people involved in the process, because you're literally saying, tick here, leave your name, leave your email address, leave your address, and we will do the rest. We will send your comments through to the council. And what we're finding now on schemes where we might have only got 150, 200 people engaged in the planning process, we're getting up to 2,000 people who are prepared to use some of these tools and actually say, I want development. And I think what we will find on this project, it will be something that would be very, very easy to do and easy to mobilise. So that's my comments. I'm happy to be grabbed later if you've got any questions or answer any queries when we get onto the discussion at a later stage. Thank you very much.